right, here we are, episode 19. They just keep growing. Next one's going to be 20. Might have to have a
Yep.
celebration or something, Chad. To imagine that you and I would get along for 20 episodes. I don't know, that's here we are. Our friendship is growing. It's kind of good.
It is. I mean, even more amazingly, we found time to do 20 episodes
I know,
with
I
your
know.
schedule and definitely
Yeah,
mine.
yeah.
That is quite a feat. So,
The fun thing is, there's been at least one moment, I think it's just once, that I was in Nashville. We got to meet in a coffee shop and actually see what each other looks like in person. So that was good. And see that we're actually
yeah.
real people. So, but Chad, you have had an amazing vision for this in whole endeavor. The whole world of 90s worship I am continually fascinated by, and I'm so privileged that you're giving me this opportunity to join with you and interview so many folks who have like an inside view of what it is. Many of them are artists, or today we're going to actually be talking to Amber Peairs. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I didn't even ask her. Is it? It's Amber
Close
Peairs,
enough.
but she's stuck some extra letters in there to
Yeah.
confuse those of us who are reading her name. So we're
Peairs.
like, we're not sure.
Peairs.
Peairs. I think I'm hearing her in the background. There we go. Anyways, she's got a whole ministry called The Worship Life. She's an artist, songwriter, worship leader, a coach, mentor, so many eras, and probably like me and like yourself, has been in this world of worship ministry for 30 plus years. And so this will be a fascinating conversation, just to go back a little bit into the woods of time and kind of walk through the journey of where we've come. I'm looking forward to this. So are you ready to dive in? Chad, do you have the first question to ask Amber? I think I'm going to put you on the spot. You're the first, okay?
Okay, yeah. Right
Okay,
after we have our little bumper, we'll do it.
here we go. Here we go. It's Chad and Amber Peairs coming on you. Chad, you're supposed to jump in. You just went
Oh,
silent. I was
well,
like, I was
I'm so
trying to
used to you
set
saying
you up.
hi, then I was gonna jump in. Well, very
See,
professional
Amber,
podcast.
welcome to our
So,
professional podcast. I was
very
like, nope.
professional, especially our producer, very
Yeah,
professional guy.
yeah. Oh well, I could run this again. We could try it again, but this is how it goes. Welcome to our show, Amber.
We go.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Excited to
Yes.
get to chat with y'all today.
Yes. Amber, you look like a professional, I must say. Your camera, your hat, your hair, your makeup, you've got it all going on. I mean, Chad and I, we just throw it together, like hoping we look half decent. But
Well, thank you. If I
yes,
could wear a ball cap and get away with it, I would.
I know, right? Right. Okay, well, I
Okay.
told Chad he was going to have to come out of the gate first.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Okay.
Chad,
Well,
you know
I'm ready,
Amber.
Ryan.
Okay,
Yes.
here we go, Chad.
I'm ready. Yes. So welcome, Amber. Thank you so much for being part of it. 90s Worship Podcast today, and
Yeah.
just for our audience, Amber and I have known each other directly for about a month now. We met at a little regional worship conference that we both presented at over in California. And I was just, blown away by Amber's presentation and just her knowledge about, worship ministry. And, we
Mhm.
had some great conversation about that. And Amber got to see the exclusive viewing of 90s Worship Night docuseries episode 1. So we got to talk about that. So I kind of thought, it'd be great to have her on our podcast, Ryan, and
Yeah,
let our
fantastic.
audience, benefit from her wealth of knowledge and experience.
Yeah. Well, Amber, what do you think about this whole 90s worship thing? Like, are you as fascinated as the two of us are about the journey that we've all been on as worship leaders over these last recent, call it 30 years? What's your
Oh, yes.
window on that world?
I love it because I think sometimes, the more years that go by, we can kind of forget all that occurred and all that happened in those years as God was shaping us and molding
Yeah.
us and we were learning and growing as worship leaders and how things have changed so much. And um, it was so amazing to be thinking through this and thinking through the podcast and
Mm-hmm.
talking with Chad and reminiscing and remembering and going back to those moments
Mm-hmm.
that I had forgotten about, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so sweet. It was such a sweet time of the Lord just reminding me
Yeah.
of things, and memories would pop up that I hadn't thought about in years, and songs that I hadn't heard in years. And I was like going to Spotify to go find those songs
I
again.
know.
And it
Yeah.
just brought back all those memories. And
Yeah.
so, yes, and getting to view the documentary, it was so special because I was actually a part of that era and that time, and
Yeah.
actually went and saw the Pensacola revival. So it was just really awesome, and I'm just again honored to be a part of this.
Did you go to Pensacola yourself?
I did.
Do
I
you
did.
know that in half an hour, Chad and I are interviewing Lindell Cooley? Can you believe it? I think you need to help
That
us.
is so cool.
Isn't that
That's
cool?
so cool.
I know.
Yep.
You get to be episode 19. Lindell is episode 20. I mean, if he shows up, we never know if we can catch him on his schedule. We just keep waiting till he actually lands. But yes.
I love that. Yeah, I stood in line for hours and hours like everybody else to go.
Tell us. I think we should just start there. Chad, you think of the next question, but now I'm running with this a little bit. So, what was that? What was that like? Like, take us through what you can remember of that experience in that era. What set you up to even go there, and how did it impact you, that experience?
Well, I had heard some of the music coming out of the revival, and just hearing everyone talk about it, and in our church circles, and a lot of people from our church were going. And so our staff at the church I was a part of at the time decided to take a trip there. And so we drove to
Yeah.
Pensacola, and I
Yeah.
believe it was actually Father's Day, maybe a year later from when it
Mm-hmm.
started, and waited in line outside, and you got to meet people from all over the world. So people were in their little groups, and some people had guitars and they were singing songs,
Yeah.
and you just got to meet people from all walks of life, some in ministry, some not. And then the services were just everything that I had expected, but even more. Like just being
Uh-huh.
there, and the
Yeah.
energy and just the presence of God was so thick. And it was an amazing experience.
Wow. So amazing. Well, what are some songs that you might remember from that? Maybe it was from Pensacola or from the era. Songs or voices? I mean, we've all got songs and voices that stick in our mind from this era that were significant for you. If I had asked you that, what would that be for you?
Well, specifically to Pensacola,
Yeah.
We Will Ride, that song, the horse song.
Yes.
We
The
actually did
horse
that
song.
at our church, and our
Yeah.
church loved it.
Yes.
And it was amazing. And
Yeah.
maybe it didn't work at every church, but
Yeah.
I think I was intentional to set it up scripturally, and with
Yeah.
the biblical foundation behind the song. And we did it during a revival meeting, and I think it just really resonated with the congregation. So we did that song. We did I Need You More. Love that
Mm-hmm.
song. More of
Mm-hmm.
Your Power. I had the
Mm-hmm.
whole CD uh,
Mm-hmm.
and played it over and over, all the CDs that came out of
Yeah.
that time. And
Yeah.
it was amazing. But
Yeah.
then also, definitely Hillsong played a
Yes.
huge role in that, because I discovered Shout to the Lord like in 1993 when I was a young worship leader
Yeah.
at a church. It was my first position.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also working at Family Christian Bookstore. So I would, I would undo the boxes that would come in. So I got to see all the new music out as it was coming
Yeah.
out. And it was just a fun time. I really got to discover a lot of new music, and I was listening to Rich Mullins and Michael W.
Yeah.
Smith, but Hillsong really resonated with me because of Darlene
Mm-hmm.
Check and Shout to the Lord. And at that time, we had a choir, and the choir, choirs back then were known for just doing solos, special music.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to incorporate the choir in worship, like a
For sure.
worship choir. And Hillsong had the choir sound, and they had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of arrangements that you could use for
Mm-hmm.
choir. So we started doing Shout to the Lord and Power of Your Love
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus Lover of My Soul and all those
Mm-hmm.
songs. So that really impacted me. I remember those early years in ministry and in the early 90s. And
Yeah.
then in the late 90s, I would say Daryl Evans.
Mm-hmm.
Daryl Evans was a voice that shifted things for me.
Yeah.
The songs, the lyrics, they were different. They were more acoustic driven,
Yeah.
and it actually influenced me to learn guitar.
Right.
And I picked up acoustic guitar and started leading with that. And it was directly from that Daryl Evans sound and era.
Yeah. He brought kind of like that acoustic rock element. If people are listening, maybe are wondering who Daryl Evans are. Maybe you remember the song "Trading My Sorrows." That's certainly a big one that I remember. And then there was another one,
Yes.
the river or something about the
Let
river,
the river
but
flow. Yeah.
"Let the River Flow." That
Let
was
the
a
river
big
flow.
song. But these are certainly "Trading My Sorrows" had that. Don't don't don't. It kind of had that acoustic rock rhythmic repetition that people could just
Yes,
sink into. And yes,
definitely.
Lord, yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, is just such an era. So many of these songs actually had an incredibly um, powerful simplicity to them. Even what Lindell Cooley was doing, "We Will Ride." I mean, that song was written spontaneously on the stage. That's how Andy Park sort
I
of
need
came.
you
He
more. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
well, I'm talking
Yeah.
about "We Will Ride" in particular. That song was written spontaneously, but Lindell
Wow.
was trying to make all these songs. He was inventing all these worship songs that you didn't. He didn't have time to do worship practices. Well,
Yeah.
Chad, we're going to find out about this in our interview later on. But he was like, "We don't have time to learn songs. We just got to go. Listen, it's 1 4 6 5. Let's go. Here's the lyrics, right? Because
That's
revival
amazing.
isn't sitting and waiting. It's just we have to invent this as we go, and perhaps
Right.
slightly in contrast to what Hillsong was doing was bringing a little bit more sophistication to it. Even "Shout to the Lord." There's, I mean, it's not that complex of a song, but you can't just get a choir all on the same page spontaneously on stage.
Right.
That whole era for me, I mean, that was the bedrock to where praise charts grew out of was Hillsong, and they were bringing the choir, the brass section, all of that. That's what inspired us to write music because people wanted to know what are they doing to make those sounds. And so you had
Yes. And
Pensacola, Hillsong. It was coming from all ends, and it wasn't just the same either. Hillsong wasn't just like Pensacola, but there was oh, something was going on that was just amazing in all of that. So,
yeah.
what an era that was that we all got to just live out of. So now maybe we should just ask ourselves, where have we come in 35 years? Are we better? Are we worse? Have we lost an edge? Have we gained some new things? What's your thought? Because Amber, you're in a world of training and teaching and coaching new young worship leaders, but you've been around like all of us. I can see all of us have been around for 30 years. What's your sense of where we've come in 30 years?
Wow. Well, it's been a lot of ebbs and flows.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed musically, if we're just talking musically, there was a shift from that early 90s choral gospel feel. And then you got the mid late 90s, more that acoustic rock sound, which was
Mm-hmm.
actually following the trend in secular music, going to more the grunge rock or the pop rock, the folky
Mm-hmm.
acoustic guitar. So I definitely, being in ministry and being a worship pastor during those years, I remember, you know, my song list changing and everything just looking a little different musically. And, now we're using more loops and tracks where we didn't back then. It was a lot
Mm-mm.
more raw, maybe organic. Or you had early 90s, we had the full orchestra. I actually
Mm-hmm.
used praise charts a lot at
Yeah.
our church because we had
Wow.
an orchestra
Yeah.
and a choir.
Yeah.
And so then it moved into the late 90s where it was more like an acoustic band and we were playing at camps, and it was just a very different feel. And then lyrically, I feel it's been different too. You know,
Hmm.
back in the 90s, it was more simplistic. I even think maybe really biblically based and repetitive.
Hmm.
And then you had Vineyard. Vineyard was kind of starting that spontaneous kind of move before
Yeah.
Bethel came along and some
Yeah.
others. They were kind of giving everyone a taste of that. But then it was kind of in the late 2000s, early 2010s, when Bethel and that spontaneous sound,
Yeah.
flowing
Yeah.
music kind of came. So I definitely remember that trend. And then it kind of went into this worship is a genre. You know, worship is
Yeah.
now on the radio,
Right.
and Christian radio is actually not doing as much CCM, but they're actually blending in worship songs from church bands, and church bands are becoming
Yeah.
household names.
Yeah.
And that's the shift that I've seen, that I think I love it. I love that worship to Jesus has found its way into modern culture, but
Yeah.
I do think we have to be careful, and that
Hmm.
it has gone to another extreme sometimes, where it's taken the focus of off who it's really about, and
Yeah.
it can go that direction, and we can worship the music and worship and the sound instead of worshiping Jesus. So I have seen that trend, and but I do love that people can turn on the radio and hear worship music. That's very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
But I just think we have to be careful. And even with the songwriting, we kind of went through a phase of everything was more introspective, very emotional driven
Yeah.
and poetic and kind of introspective. And now I feel like we're shifting back to like we were in the 90s, where it was very vertical, very declarative. And I'm seeing that trend come back, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah. Certainly, there are some publishers or songwriters. Like I'm just thinking of the Gettys and Sovereign Grace and City of Light, people like that that are trying to remake a sense of the new hymns. You know, writing sophisticated songs that are really, really finding a new place. And I'm even seeing Bethel making some shifts, that some of the songs that they're even putting out are not just the touchy feely songs. They're actually trying
Right.
to say something as well, uh, that is sophisticated, that is like teaching, that is almost hymn like a little bit in. So
Absolutely.
I'm
I love
really,
it. I
and
see the blending. I see that blending of
yeah,
it's biblically sound, but it actually has like storytelling, maybe
yeah,
it's that personal storytelling attached to it, and they're blending the two together. It's
yeah,
not either or.
right. Like
Yeah.
Hillsong's King of Kings would be an example of that to me. Of
Yeah.
it feels like a modern hymn, but that is from, I mean, Brooke Ligertwood is an incredibly profound songwriter. She's now writing, I think, even a lot out of Bethel Church. Maybe she's the
Yeah.
one that's bringing the depth into these different places. It's people like her. Of course, there's lots of other songwriters who are very deep and profound. Reuben Morgan and
Yes.
oh, who's the guy that wrote Ben Fielding as well? Is
Mhm.
sometimes
Great
it's just
songwriter.
now that I'm thinking about this and speaking about it, it's about the songwriter. Like songwriters have the commitment to, you know, depth of lyric and message and rhyme and musicality, and then they bring that all in. These are
Yeah.
all the people that lurk behind these songs, where you just listen to them on the radio and think, "Oh, I just love that song," but where did that song come from? And so
Yeah.
fascinating to see the circle that we're coming around. As well, I'm just thinking, just think about 30 years and how music technology has developed. Like we've gone from all that we had accessible to everyone in the 90s pretty much was an acoustic guitar. But now we
Yeah.
all have GarageBand and Logic and all they call them DAWs, computers. We've all basically got a full on studio in front of us. So
Yeah.
that perhaps can be good, perhaps can be, and we have YouTube. Within a minute, I can load up whatever I just created in the last hour for the world to see. So it's a
Yeah.
different
It's
world,
it's
hey?
both. It's got both sides of it. Whereas what I'm seeing in like young people and musicians, because they have the tracks and the
Yeah.
loops, they can tend to lean more on that instead of working on their craft.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it becomes a crutch. Whereas,
Right.
in the 90s, you had to know how to play. you,
Right.
you, had, you were
Yeah.
exposed. You were a lot
Yeah.
more exposed.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, now, Amber, you're in a world where you have the worship life. I just want to show the folks here so we can see this. It looks like quite a vast service. That could you just tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the worship life and the experiences that you have to be able to offer many churches, from speaking, singing, coaching. Then maybe I'll ask a few questions, or Chad and I can prompt you as you tell us a little bit about this. But can you give me a little journey?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So my heart is to equip, empower, and encourage worship leaders and teams, and
Mm-hmm.
that's globally. So the Lord has opened the door for us to be international and go all over the world and invest and pour into these teams. And I do that through workshops, whether that's in person or online. And
Mm-hmm.
I do workshops on many worship topics, all the way from processes and systems and worship ministry to healthy worship culture to vocal training and vocal technique.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do one-on-one mentoring with worship pastors and worship leaders and coaching, because when I grew up in the 90s and as a young worship leader, I didn't have anyone mentoring me. I didn't have anyone that I was learning from. I just
Mm-hmm.
kind of did it. I did the thing. I watched Darlene Check, and I was just doing it blindly. And so I wanted to be that for someone else. And so I offer one-on-one coaching and mentoring. And then I also I consult with churches on their worship ministry. So I'll come in as an outside perspective, another set of
Yeah.
eyes, and I will observe their services, observe what they're doing on the platform, how they're leading, and then I'll give them feedback in that. And I also guest lead worship with the teams while I'm
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And then I'm working on a vocal course that's coming out in the fall.
Fantastic. Can you give me a sense of what are some common themes you're discovering as you would go and do some consulting with churches? Do you find some patterns or coming up that you're seeing a lot of churches are wrestling with this? Is it technology? Is it stage presence? Is it how to play as a band together? What are some things that you find churches are needing?
A lot of it is vocal technique. So
Really?
a lot of singers have never had the opportunity to be coached or trained in proper vocal technique that's going to be healthy, that's going to help sustain them. So a lot of them having vocal issues. A lot of these churches have multiple services. And
Yeah.
so the singers are tired, they're fatigued, and then
Hmm.
they're trying to do Easter and Christmas with, 5, 6 services, and they don't have the vocal foundation to sustain them. So
Hmm.
that's the biggest request that I get is for vocal training, healthy vocal tips and technique. And then also for the team's healthy culture. A lot of the worship pastors either inherited a culture that might not have been very healthy,
Yeah.
and they're trying to find what does that look like for their team. And so I kind of help walk them through that so that it's aligned with the vision of their church, but also what do they want it to look like, but also giving them the foundation of what healthy culture looks like on a team.
Yeah.
The basic principles. It doesn't matter if your church is really large or really small. These are principles across all churches that should be a part of healthy culture.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
could you give me I just want to ask if you could give a little teaser to, let's say, on the vocal coaching, what are some examples of a couple of principles that we could just throw out just to give people an idea? Because I might think, I don't know, I can sing. It's like I don't know what I could do to improve the way I sing. I just sing. So what are some tips that you would typically offer? Ways that
So
people could, yeah,
I tell vocalists to pay attention to their voice and how it feels.
yeah,
And if they feel fatigued, they feel tired, a lot of times that means that they're not singing with the right placement. So
Okay.
most vocalists have heard of head voice, chest voice,
Yes.
but they don't really know what that means. They
Mm-hmm.
don't know that there's actually another resonator in which they can make their sound and do it in a healthy way, which is a mixed voice. And
Mm.
most of them haven't been taught how to do a mixed voice. And so I explain to them the different resonators that they have and how to blend those together. And it actually increases their range. It
Mm.
gives them stamina and it gives them more control. And it's been amazing because I've seen these aha moments of vocalists who have maybe been singing in a different way their whole life and they've struggled or they felt like they've stayed the same their whole life and they want to go to another level with their singing. They want to increase their range. They want to be able to sing some of these contemporary worship songs that really have a wide
Yeah.
range and do an octave jump, and they're not able to do that or they have to lower the key.
Yeah.
And so when they learn this technique of singing in a mix, it opens their whole world up and they're like, wow, I didn't know my voice could do this. So
Yeah.
that's one of the big key points, but then also just vocal health because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of singers are not taking care of their voice. So they're not getting rest. They're not staying hydrated. They're eating and drinking things that really don't set them up well to sing and give an excellent offering on a Sunday because they haven't really taken care of their instrument. So I really teach them why it's important to steward their gift and their instrument, which is them. They're the
Yeah.
instrument. It's not like picking up a guitar or playing the drums. They are the instrument.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's fascinating. When you're talking about vocal range, I would say it's one of the biggest issues I feel personally about my voice. I feel self-conscious about what I feel like is a limited vocal range, and then I hear so many people complaining about all these songs that are written outside of their vocal range, and it's like
Right.
nobody wants to lead a song that's outside of their vocal range. And so learning how to transpose songs, I mean, certainly that's one option, is to transpose a song, but I know I'm personally finding if I transpose a song too much down into my vocal range, I also lose some of the power and strength of
Right.
the song and the vitality.
Right.
So it's this kind of, wrestle. And then there's also the congregation. Even just this last Sunday for me, I was led by in worship by a new worship leader at our church, and I noticed that he was keying some of the songs lower than our typical worship leader, and I was like, "Oh, I can sing these songs. Like, I don't have to find a harmony. I could actually sing the melody, you know." So vocal range is, I think it is a big beaming issue that so many churches and worship leaders would wrestle with.
Right. And
Yeah,
especially because, like we talked about the difference between the 90s and now, if you
yeah,
think about the 90s, I really hardly can recall any songs that had octave jumps.
right.
It became a trend. Hillsong kind of started it, I
Yeah,
believe, doing like a low bridge, and then they'll jump up the
yeah,
octave to the high bridge, and everybody loved it. It's great in the room. It feels awesome, but vocally, it's challenging if vocalists don't have a range to do that. So a lot of times they're moving the key down so that they don't have to do that octave jump. But then again, like you said, it loses the energy. And
yeah,
then you're also thinking about the congregation. So you're having to balance all these things. But it's definitely the songwriting has changed and gone to that trend of low, jump up high, low, jump
yeah,
up high. And so I'm just trying to give them tools to equip them to be able to navigate that and
yeah,
also give them ways to be creative that, like, if you can't hit that, let's do this, try this, and give them some
right.
other ways to still engage the room and still lead with confidence
Yeah,
because you're right. If they don't have the vocal technique and the range, they can be insecure. It hurts their confidence and that can
yeah,
hold them back when they're leading. And I want them to feel empowered and I want them to feel confident when they lead. And
yeah.
vocal technique's a big part of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so that was the teaser on vocal technique, and I'm already want to sign up. So you got me on the first one. The second one
Yay.
we were talking about is worship culture. Let's just give a few little teasers on that. So, what do you notice churches are struggling with in worship culture? Like, what is an example of a common struggle that churches would have?
One of the main ones is they don't have a culture of feedback. So
Oh,
feedback's
okay.
either been a dirty word in
Yeah.
their church. It's maybe been given not with kindness and love. Maybe it was very hurtful. And so I encourage teams that they need to have feedback loops, and they need to have a system for how they give feedback. And those who are empowered to give feedback need to give it with grace and kindness and honesty. And then those who are receiving the feedback
Mm-hmm.
to not run from it or be offended or take it personal, but actually seek it out and receive it with humility and teachability and
Yeah.
say, "Hey, I want to learn, I want to grow. Can I have feedback?" And churches that I see that have a culture that's healthy with feedback, they are really growing and thriving because there's open communication. And that's the second thing I see a problem with is a lack of communication,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's in planning center or whatever software they're using to put the agendas and songs. There's not a lot of clarity, so people don't know the expectations. They don't know what to rehearse or practice. Maybe their expectations for being on the team are not clear. So I really encourage them that communication needs to be clear
Right.
and expectations need to be very clear for the team, because that
Hmm.
just shows that you care for people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would say those are two of the biggest things is communication and feedback.
Yeah. I can certainly see with feedback, I might interpret that as criticism. I that's why I would want to resist it, because I want someone to praise me after Sunday morning. I mean, let's be honest. I want them to tell me that was amazing. I've never felt the Lord's presence so clear. All those things that we like to hear after a Sunday. Or
Yes.
yeah, please send me those texts. But let's have a review session and feedback so they could. Yeah, that would make me a bit more nervous. But like you're saying, if you build it into the culture of this is what we do, even for the very best worship services, there's
Right.
always something to improve. There's always something to review, to look back on, and building that into a culture, so
Right.
it's not
It
so intimidating. Yeah.
right. It's because we want to do things just with a spirit of excellence, and we don't want
Yeah.
perfection, but we want to grow. And so I encourage them to make sure that that's the clear why behind it. We
Yeah.
want to help people grow and develop in their giftings.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm a better worship leader because I received feedback and I
Yeah.
implemented it.
Yeah.
And yes, when I first received it, it hurt and it doesn't always feel great. But again, when you're building that culture and there's trust there, and you know that those they have your best interest at heart, and that's the culture that you have cultivated on your team, then people are going to
Yeah.
receive it a lot better, knowing that, hey, this is the breakfast of champions. Feedback
Yeah.
is the breakfast of champions.
Right.
That's how you're going to grow.
Yeah.
And feedback's the most honoring thing that you can do for people on your team. When you
Yeah.
shift that mindset,
Yeah.
it's amazing to see how much they can grow with that feedback
Yeah.
culture.
Very, very good. Well, Chad, you're soaking it all in. What's your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, no, I think this is vitally important,
Yes.
information for worship teams everywhere, and definitely our hope and the whole reason, Ryan, I know that we started this podcast was really, for educational purposes and to reflect back on, what have we learned now that modern worship is, well, I guess in a lot of regards it's, over 40 years old, but definitely look
Mm-hmm.
at the past, 30, 35 years. Um, what have we learned in that time?
Yeah. Yep. So much to learn. Well, Amber, it's been a great privilege to talk to you. Not only it's been fun to just review back through the memories of the last 30 years, but even as I was asking you for a few teasers, you actually already are giving very practical insight, even in this little podcast here. So I hope that even through this, some people, please, will put in the show notes links to the Worship Life, or go to theworshiplife.com. You can connect with Amber. Did I hear you say, is it Peairs? Help me.
It's Peairs. Peairs, like
Peairs. Okay.
Peers. Peairs.
It's like, it should have been just written Peer, but instead it's Peaieious or
A
something
lot
like
of
that.
vowels.
Lots of vowels. Anyways, wonderful, Amber. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Chad, again for your vision for this whole podcast and just encouraging the ongoing development of worship as we continue into the 20s and the 30s and beyond. So this is Ryan Dahl, Amber Peairs, and Chad, and we are so glad to have you here from the 90s Worship Podcast. Here we go.